everyone.
Let's jam.
Folks,
Yeah.
welcome to an episode of The Art Tenders with Mac and Dan. I'm Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy, y'all.
We are reviewing a wonderful anime television series, one of my absolute favorites, released in the late 90s with the director Shinichiro Watanabe and composed by Yoko Kanno, and it is a wonderful, beautiful, majestical series by the name of Cowboy Bebop. This wonderful space western that follows this ragtag group of sort of adventurers, but they're bounty hunters, and that's really the crux of it. And they're a motley crew that really shouldn't be in the same space, but they are somehow miraculously, and it breeds a lot of wonderful, small stories in this 26 episode long series. And we're going to be reviewing, other parts that Cowboy Bebop has, led to, which is, the movie that released a few years later, and then eventually the Netflix live action adaptation, a lot of words, television series that was released on Netflix.
No, I am excited for all of those. How many times have you had to pitch Cowboy Bebop? Because I know this show has been in your life, a favorite show in your life for a long time.
Define pitch.
Because I was just thinking to myself as you were saying that, you have really gotten that shit down. Like that was one of the classier intros you've ever done.
Yeah, thank God. I mean, this is like, okay, listen, folks, also for the viewing audience right now, there may be times during this episode where I'm so exhausted, I'm just going to close my eyes. I'll still be listening, but it requires so much effort to keep my eyes open that this is going to be a little bit tough for me. So it's going to lead to a very odd viewing experience. But auditorially, hopefully, everything will be exactly the way it should be.
And for our audience at home, imagine being so ugly and difficult to look at that your partner has to just close their eyes for certain portions of the episode. That's how I feel right now. But needless to say, Cowboy Bebop was a delight, an absolute delight. So thank you on the front end for suggesting it.
Well, this is a show that's commonly referred to by many throughout the years, right, as one of the best, if not the best, anime television series.
Right.
Bar none, right? There are a few competitors when it comes to that, but this is commonly regarded as one of the greats.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to the question of how many times did I have to pitch this show, there have been too many times in my life where I've attempted to and begin to show this show to more than one, and I think like three different significant others that I've had, as well as my former roommate Sam.
Wow.
And I don't think I've ever gotten past the second or third episode. Not because like they're like I don't want to watch anymore, but it's because like, and this is a critique that I have for the show now, is that I don't think this series necessarily hooks you in the first few episodes.
Sure.
You kind of have to trust it and trust that it'll take you somewhere. But in the first like 2 or 3 episodes, I don't think the hook is necessarily strong, right? And part of that too is where, and I actually quite like this, is you don't start out with the entire crew of the show on the front end. You get Faye Valentine in the 3rd episode, but she's really implemented into the 4th, and then you don't get Ed until the 9th or the 8th or the 9th episode in the series, which is pretty far in if you consider it. And it's funny to think that, the first member who was introduced outside of Spike and Jet were actually Ein, the dog, the data dog in the 2nd episode. So that's part of it too, and I think that's a big factor. Yeah.
There's actually a student that I have that recently went through a name change, not legal name change, but asked me to start calling them something different, and it was Ian, and I was like, oh, okay, I-A-N. That's how Ians spell their name. Yeah. And they spelled it Ein.
Ein.
Yeah, from the show.
That's
great.
I
thought that was really cute.
I love that.
E-I-N. I'm sorry.
I thought you had more to say from there,
really
or
didn't.
you had like another thought to go from there. But just like, let me give you that little tidbit. All right, cool. I'm contributing to this episode.
No,
Thank you very much.
That's really it.
Okay, so you thought this was your first experience, consuming the show, watching the show. What were your first impressions throughout it? I mean, this is our 3rd anime television series, right?
Yes.
We've watched Berserk, the late 90s anime adaptation from the manga, as well as Akame ga Kill.
Akame ga Kill.
Two very different
Wildly.
television shows
Wildly.
compared to this space western. So,
Yeah.
so what were your impressions with this show in particular?
So I really did enjoy the show a lot. It's one of those shows where if you hadn't recommended it, I definitely would not have started watching it. Like, there's no reason for me to have encountered it.
Yeah,
Than you know what I mean? I probably wouldn't have even watched the live action one. To be honest,
Didn't you start watching the live action one?
I was about to. Yeah, and it was purely because you had mentioned Cowboy Bebop, and I really didn't even know the difference.
Well,
Like,
and
I
also
knew so little about Cowboy Bebop that I thought that was what the actual one was.
Oh my
And then I
God.
realized, like, wait, no, this was made very recently. This is shot in 4K, and so I stopped.
this is shot in 4K.
Yeah, it's shot with like lens flares in 4K, so it feels very Netflixy right now, and it was annoying. Anyways, we'll get to that someday, I'm sure. But yeah, no, it really was spectacular, and I gotta say, probably the most impressive part is that it felt very modern, but mainly. And I don't know if I should say this is a good thing, but to me it was a good thing. Very American. It felt
Yes.
very American, partially in like the influences that it had, but also like in its format and its in its structure. Like you're talking about the it doesn't really have a hook at the beginning because it kind of hooks like a sitcom, to be honest, like
In
an
a way,
American sitcom. In that rather than ushering you in and giving you like a full
There's
first
no
act,
exposition.
no, it just starts with the concept.
Yeah.
Like whatever the concept of the show ends up being, that's what they give you in the first episode. And most sitcoms are that way. Like it's just another day in the life of the friends, the gang, or whatever. You know what I mean? Which is really pretty impressive, as well as some of the like just the jokes and the references are hilariously American, as well as the genre, I would say.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like any anime I've ever experienced in my life,
No.
which is not a lot.
This is a western. This is a noir
Mm-hmm.
sort of television series, and sort of like also with the characters themselves. Like, it's not Japanese centric, right? It is not East Asian centric, right? Of
Right.
course, there are still going to be the East Asian influences or some characters here and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it seems very clear that this was like an American inspired, and when I say American inspired, more so with the media, right? With movies that come
Right.
from America from decades of the past, right?
Yeah.
And this is irrevocably one of, if not like the coolest show ever. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
all of the characters are wicked cool.
That's true. That's true.
And they're all smoking cigarettes, like, as if it's not unhealthy, but they make it look so cool, and they're all
Yeah.
carrying around like pistols as
Right,
well,
right.
and these like pretty cool spaceships. But it's this sort of punk inspired, as well as this interesting blend of like retro futurism. That's not too like
Retrofuturism.
that is not too chromy,
Yeah.
but it has that rugged, dirty,
Yeah.
rustic
And
sort
it's
of nature.
weird. They do this awesome thing where, kind of similar to a lot of Star Wars movies, they paint a picture of the future that is somehow nostalgic.
Yes.
Isn't that funny?
That is a perfect way to describe it. Yes.
But that's exactly what they do, and it is super
yeah,
impressive.
where
That-
like a lot of influences come from the 70s and the 80s.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And
Now-
like with character designs too.
Yeah.
Like nobody's hairstyles or anything like that is like iconic for the time of like the late 90s.
Right.
It's all much older than that.
Right, and it feels that way too. Like the way that the texture of each frame is specifically grainy and like brush strokey.
Yes.
And it's nice in that way because it makes you feel a little more classic. You know.
Yeah, and so like even though it's the sort of version that we saw, it's available on Netflix currently.
Yeah.
It's not like upscaled, right, for a 16:9
No,
format.
no.
It's still in the 4:3, I believe, is the dimensions of it, and it's like it's in HD now, right? But it's like nothing is like up-resed in any sort of way. And so what really helps this show survive in more ways than one is the really strong art design
Oh yeah.
that comes from all of that retrofuturism, and then also how that is blended with the music, which
I was about to say, whenever you brought this show in at the top and you talked about, all right, Cowboy Bebop directed by, and then you said composed by, I don't think we've ever reviewed something, and I can't think of many things other than musicals that would have an intro like directed by and composed by.
Yeah.
But this is one of those few and rare examples where it's safe to say that the music actually is that influential for this story.
Sizzle serve that this is the best sort of music example that we have seen in a film or like TV matter, aka not an album, right? This
Yeah.
is the best music that we have consumed from something that is not an album, right? I think Yoko Kanno brings it together with her band, the Seatbelts, and a bunch of wonderful compositions, as well as one of, if not the best intro to a TV show of all time.
Bar none. Not even close. I legitimately sat my entire family down just to watch the intro. I was like, you don't even need to watch the show. But then they watched the intro and they were like, okay, let's keep watching.
It's not often where the music is a character.
Now, you said that was your sizzle serve. I have a little bit of a qualm with that because sizzle serve implies that that's a hot take. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. I understand.
Now, I gotta say, Danny, this also a first for our show because for the very first time in this show's history, we have the same sizzle serve. That was mine too. My exact same sizzle serve was
Bang,
this is
bang.
the best music we've ever heard.
Yeah.
For the show, specifically in terms of like for film or TV or something like
Yeah.
that. Now, there's other really good music that we've listened to.
Oh, absolutely.
But-
This is not meant to be a disparagement on
No.
other things that we have seen.
But this is easily one of the only things that we've seen where even though the music is not the story, I still am going to save all the music and listen to it forever
Yes.
and ever.
Oh, yes, I still do. I still do. The
Yeah.
first time I watched this show, I think it was my sophomore year in high school. So that, I think, was around 8 years ago or something, which is wild to me to think about now.
Yeah.
But I have been listening to that music since then.
Now, that's actually a good segue because, Danny, not how long, but how many times have you seen this show?
That's the funniest part. This is my second time.
Get the fuck out.
And it's one of my favorite shows. Yeah.
You watched the first time and were so confident in it
Yes.
that you were just like, this is it.
I know it's good. Occasionally, like, I'll watch a clip or two on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, but I haven't rewatched it because I don't know. It encapsulated such a time and such a emotional moment for me that I wasn't. I never felt the need to go back and like relive that experience. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I knew the experience was good by itself. I had no reason to relive it. you know?
Okay, sure. So, okay, then this is an
I mean,
excellent
except for the
launch.
times that I've tried to show it to multiple people and have failed
So you've
for
seen the
whatever
first
reason.
couple episodes a million times.
Yes, no, I've
Um,
seen the first 2 episodes multiple
That's-
times.
I mean, they're great episodes, so I mean,
Yeah,
we'll
they
get to
are.
that. A small plug, by the way, just saying we also
Smug?
have a little.
Sorry. Okay, hold on. I did not have the window, and I still forced myself in with
Get out of the
combining
way.
2 words.
Smug.
Small plug.
Yeah, small little plug. Lug. That we are also going to be doing a tier list.
Yes.
For this episode. We have our regular episode that we're doing right now, obviously. But we're also going to have a second part to this episode.
It's going to be a made for YouTube
Yeah.
sort of content, right?
Yeah.
Where to be determined whether or not it'll be released on audio mediums. But
We'll see how it goes.
that is an excellent
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
But that's a really good segue. I think.
Oh, this is a good segue to what was your experience this time?
Oh.
Because you talked a little bit about how this was different for you than last time, but I'm curious, how was it different for you? You being in a different place than you were then, how does that affect your experience?
This is always the joy of seeing something a second time, and primarily a second time for this show. And sometimes things are better, sometimes things are worse. And in the case of Cowboy Bebop, sometimes things are just different. You know, this show was still great. I still had
Yeah.
a fun time watching the show. I remembered the somewhat overarching narrative to be hook into me more. I remember that being the case. It didn't so much this time.
Yeah.
But what actually hooked me a lot more this time was the relationships between the characters, between
Oh.
Spike, between Jet, between Faye, between Ed, and also kind of between Ayn as
Really?
well. And the blend of that crew together on their adventures was something that was so much more of a treat to watch in this time.
Yeah.
As well as, even though the overall narrative I didn't really care for, and like Spike's backstory, I was like, it's not as cool this time because I'm not really that edgy this time. What was also really interesting to me was that structurally, most of the episodes sort of have their own plots and they sort of stand on their own, and they're not really referenced back to too often. Maybe occasionally an offhand comment here and there. But what's really nice is that at the same time, the character relationships and progression with each other within, the narrative within each other really tracks. And so the best example is Faye Valentine, right?
Yep.
Who I think is just a wonderful, wonderful character portrayed by Wendy Lee, in the dub, at least. Also, really fast, I gotta say, like, the dubbing for the show, fantastic.
One of the best dubs, I'm sure.
Yes, I need to find the dubbing director, because
the
vocal direction for the English dub of the show is one of the best.
Yeah.
Right? There are a lot of animes that you can, and a lot of stuff that comes from out of Japan or any other foreign country, that the vocal direction is hit or miss here or there. But for the most part, I would say 95% of it really hits. Really hits, especially with the main cast.
I was curious about that. I saw an article that was talking about, from a multilingual perspective, if you know both Japanese and English, how do dubs translate and how decent are dubs? And one person that is able to speak both Japanese and English said that this is maybe the only case of that they've ever seen of an English dub being comparable or even slightly better than the original Japanese cast.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I was very shocked to see that,
impressive.
but that was really interesting to me. I mean, I can't attest to that, and I have no idea, but that was interesting for me.
And that credit goes to, and hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who was the vocal director for this show. And fun fact, I had to check up on this just in case because I didn't want to get fined for this. But Steve Bloom, who plays Spike Spiegel in the show, they are married since 2017.
Get out!
Isn't that adorable?
2017.
Yeah, fairly recently.
20 years after the fact.
Yes, 19? but they've been working together consistently, and
That's crazy.
they had a budding relationship that grew from there. It's
gosh
dang cutest thing in the world.
That is so cute. Wow.
But back to my original point about Faye Valentine and
Wendy
Lee's portrayal is that she is very aloof in a sort of way emotionally when she is first introduced in the third and implemented really in the fourth episode, right? And then you see how there's this like unspoken love, and this goes for the rest of the crew too, right? There's unspoken love that the crew has for one another as the show goes on, right? Where if you, in a hypothetical scenario, if you go up to one of the characters and say, Jet, how much do you care about Spike? He would say, I don't give a shit about Spike. Yeah. But deep down, he would die for that man.
That's true.
He would jump on a grenade for him.
That's the truth.
Exactly. So, and it really, really tracks. And when you get to the end of the series, where Spike is essentially going to his death, and Faye is like ends with
starts
him
firing the gun
at the ceiling just out of frustration, like, and putting Spike at gunpoint, obviously not going to shoot him, but there's such a massive amount of anger because all of that anger is coming from a place of love that grows slowly and so unspoken and Jacobian in a way throughout the series, and it's so well done. And like Jet's sort of like fatherly approach to Ed, for example, and everybody's tolerance with Ed, the wacky hacker child. It's a wonderful thing that happens where the show never really shoves it in your face. Yeah. It's a casual thing that sort of goes on as these characters get used to each other and are around each other and grow to care about and love each other.
Well, that also was a beautiful moment that you were talking about with Faye, as she fires the gun after Spike is about to leave for Vicious. That there is there's something beautiful about the fact that Faye can't really express or can't really say in words, I need you here right now.
I mean, that's every character, right?
Right. But the fact that
so when a character does say that,
Uh-huh.
or in some capacity says something like
Right.
that, it's like that feels so out of character.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
not out of character in terms of the script, but out of character for who
but
they are.
it's impressive that they were able to write it and direct it in such a way.
Oh my god! And Mac, the battery, Mac. What happened, Mac? What do we do, Mac? Where do we go from here?
Oh, I don't know. I just need to throw those away.
Let's do a. Was that the Amazon battery?
Yeah.
What?
I told you I switched out the Amazon battery because the Canon battery was all of a sudden at half after 5 minutes.
Yeah, but you never do the Amazon battery. I thought we knew this.
I'm just gonna have to throw them out at this point. It's just so unreliable.
All right. So regardless, let's take a quick pause.
Yeah, let's
Let's regroup mentally. Let's see if we do. Let's see.
Let's see.
We're rolling.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
folks,
Yeah. All
look.
blasting off all cylinders.
So, out of nowhere, it truly is a tragedy, an absolute American tragedy.
For you, while recording our 58th episode, Mac, you just got 2 more points
I
because
just
the
got 2 more
camera
points.
died. So where are we at, Mac? You're helping the visual audience, but you're not helping the audio medium.
Well, let me help the audio medium out by saying that I am at 11 points and Danny is at 7.
I'm at 7 points. Mac is at 11, and at the end of the 59th episode, this will determine whoever has more points has to dress up in a costume
And
of some capacity.
Look, do you know what mine is going to be yet?
Your costume?
Yeah.
No, I figured we would go to Party City together, like a little, like a
Oh,
a field trip.
What a demoralizing way to do it.
I think that'd be fun.
I mean, it would be fun, but it's more like I just have to look at my doom, you know?
Yeah, dude, would you like to dress as Doctor Doom? Would that help?
Fuck yeah, you can. MF Doom. They won't have that at Party City. I
Yeah,
don't
but like
think.
MF Doom has like Doctor
the Doctor
Doom's
Doom
mask.
stuff. Right. But I'm going to like bring a mic.
We already, Christ. I mean, useless. Okay, we were talking about Faye
we were
Valentine.
talking about Faye Valentine, absolutely, and what a absolute dynamic character that is. As well as, I'm just so damn impressed that they are able to have such deep backstories for all these characters.
And explored, too.
Yeah.
Explored in a sufficient enough capacity where I'm like, cool, I feel satisfied, right?
Yeah.
This is not an a Kami Ga Kill situation either, where on the introduction or immediate implementation of a character, we are shoved with a backstory
Right.
that they are narrating. That's
what I was about to say.
Which is the laziest thing, where we have actually in most of these episodes, where instead of like a character telling us the backstory, that may be the sort of framing, right? But we'll either see the backstory or we will have the character sort of experience the baggage from previous events now. Like some of the best examples are like the episodes with Jet. For example, when we experience, some of his baggage, right? Where I think the one is called Ganymede Elegy, where he goes back to his sort of like hometown and his lover from years past, and he sees her again and like has to like confront with the reality and like dealing with the past, which is a huge theme
Right.
that this show visits a lot, is sort of like confronting the past and how do we live with the past lives that we have. And so, but the narrative approach to these backstories and to these sort of lives that these characters have lived is a refreshing one. It's a refreshing one that I like. This should be the standard for how stories should approach and negotiate lives from characters' past.
That's a very eloquent way of saying that, but I agree absolutely. that was just I was kind of blown away. No, this is an absolute masterclass in show don't tell.
Yeah.
That I don't have to get this backstory shoved down my throat like in the instance of a Kami Ga Kill like we were talking about.
Yeah.
But that it just sort of appears there.
Yeah.
And also, what I'm so impressed by is that rather than just like having these intense and long-winded flashbacks,
Right.
they do a really, really good job of showing, going back
Going back and forth, back and forth.
but also showing you as you're getting information on the past, what that means in real time.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that that's the main part, is that it's not like, oh, you need to know a little bit about Jet in this way before we get to Ganymede Elegy.
Hey, Spike, let me tell you about this one time.
Exactly. But the fact that we see Jet like make eye contact with a person, and then
So sorry, it's just like every episode of a comic.
every one of them was just like, I need to tell you something. And you're like, fuck this again. It's the truth, though.
It's almost every episode.
It's literally every episode. But
It's
anyways,
the same length as Cowboy Bebop, which is
you're
funny.
lying.
I mean, it's 24, 26 episodes, something like that.
Oh, and
I
same
know,
length
right?
too, huh?
Yeah.
Those were some lengthy episodes.
Crazy, yeah.
This is a very good show in terms of length as well. Now, okay, I would like to get your take on this, because this is something that I definitely experienced. Was it at all frustrating to you the way the last episode ended? Not necessarily, because like obviously in terms of story, it was fucking gorgeous. But does it feel it? Because it felt like it was setting itself up for a much longer running show than one season.
I do think the show is like actually too short.
Yeah.
You know, like even though the character progression tracks, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
I wish I had more time with the characters.
Yeah. And they always say, like, leave your audience wanting more. But in this case, I don't think it's a good thing. Like, I actually
legitimately
would really
wanted more.
Yeah.
Which is a testament also to the quality of what we were given.
Right.
For this series, right? This is also exacerbated by the fact that I actually think Spike's backstory is not very interesting or
Oh.
captivating.
Uh-huh.
In minus Julia, right? So Julia is Spike's old lover from years past. I
Right.
don't know why I'm always saying it like that. Old lover from years past. Like I make it sound so forlorn,
it's old fling. One of those.
There it is, the old flame
Yeah.
that
Oh, the old flame.
yeah, it's
Yes.
embers, and the old fling is a very different kind of individual.
Different
Um,
kind. Good.
Yeah, where like I think his relationship with Julia and how that is teased throughout the series is pretty good. But Vicious is not an interesting character. His name's literally Vicious. Like, can we stop with like edgelords,
Right,
please?
right.
Can we stop? Can we
Edgelords,
Can we
oh.
start a campaign that like if your edgelord is not cool enough, or if your edgelord is not interesting enough, then don't have an edgelord. I'm tired of your edgelords.
Right.
Now, mind you, I'm not in high school or middle school anymore. I'd be like, yeah, Vicious. He's kind of cool. But now I'm like, Vicious is boring as all hell. Why is he doing anything that he's doing?
Right.
What the hell are his motivations?
I will say that in the last episode, very last episode.
But to answer your question, yeah, it did feel like something bigger was going to happen at one point. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was and well, this is the thing. The show up until the last two episodes was, because it was a two-parter, was telling you that it was going to be a long-running show. And then out of nowhere, it's just like, Spike has to go prove himself. And you're like, what the fuck?
But long-running show in what sense?
In that I felt like it was setting itself up for, like any other sitcom or any other anime, that lasts for a million seasons or whatever, or
in the sense of like these characters are experiencing something right now that like really have consequences. This is going to be a shift in the storytelling.
Right. Another way of putting it is that I feel like this and Avatar: The Last Airbender are very unique in that they are both shows that do such a good job of setting up the world and the universe, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just weird that they don't capitalize more on it. You know what I mean? Like, I know so many people that are obsessed with this Cowboy Bebop universe that they build, but it's difficult to be obsessed with something that it only gives you so much information. You know what I mean?
That's true.
That's kind of bothersome because
and information that is like spread out that you really have to listen to it and like pick up on it.
Right.
Like it's so easy to miss that.
Right.
50 years ago from the events of the show, there was a giant accident with a hyperspace gate that exploded the moon that now a bunch of yeah, exactly,
didn't
right?
even-
But it's like mentioned multiple times, but super duper in passing because in the context of the characters, like it kind of makes sense. But it's super duper in passing for
Yeah.
them that for some side characters, super important, like in Sympathy for the Devil, the kid who doesn't age, because of that accident.
Oh, right.
You see, the reason why the Earth is always having meteor showers is because of that accident.
Okay.
It's so like things that influence the world, but they don't like shove it down your throat of like, these are the things that are happening.
I just remember there was an accident. I didn't even piece it together that like they were talking about the same accident so many times.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is a catalyst for a lot of events in the show. But this
also so interesting that they go to so many different places and so many people. The people are humanoid. You know what I mean?
Oh, you thought there would be more aliens?
I guess a little
But
bit.
we're still in the solar system. We're still in the
Right.
same solar system.
Right, but still. The other thing is like you go to a new place of some sort in nearly every episode. In the same way that like Star Trek would. You know, like that almost every episode you're finding out something absolutely new and you have to adjust yourself to this new setting or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's frustrating because I figured that it would be a Star Trek type thing where I would get this for a super long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it didn't even feel like, oh, there's this really, because like with something like Avatar: Last Airbender or like Ted Lasso, for instance, they know exactly where the end is, so they don't want to make it any longer than it has to be. But it's frustrating in this instance because it felt like it was more of an attention span thing than anything. That the person who wrote this originally or storyboarded this was just like, yeah, I think I kind of just want to end it here because I'm not sure how much more I want to say.
Maybe they only had 26 episodes to work with.
Oh,
Maybe that
sure.
was just the structure that they had to abide to. I don't know the
Me
backstory
neither.
in regards to that, but all we have are these 26 episodes to judge this show on.
Beautiful
and we
episodes.
wish we had more because it's fun and we wish we could see these characters stretch their legs in these environments. Let's go to break. Welcome back. I know usually I don't lead the charge, but I am leading the charge, and I'm going to put this on the front end that hopefully I don't put my foot in my freaking mouth. So let's see how I do because I'm treading water for myself that I can easily put my foot in my mouth.
I mean, hey, you prefaced, and I'll be here to just go like this if need be.
Thanks. We're going to talk about Mushroom Samba for a little bit. And because Mushroom Samba has a few really, let's just say, problematic elements. If we're looking at this episode in a vacuum, and as you should in most cases when it comes to art, I think, I was going to say this bit at the end, but I guess now I'm just saying it at the beginning, that I think you should look at art in both capacities of looking at it in a vacuum and looking at it with context of, intent, baggage from whoever is, stirring the pot that makes the art, right? I think it's important to acknowledge both factors. In regards to Mushroom Samba, which is kind of one of my favorite episodes now after rewatching it, and kind of for a big reason, is because this episode is an Ed plus Ein adventure.
Yeah.
They're doing their own thing, and they're on Earth, I believe, and everybody in the crew is kind of knocked out, and they're also high as hell off of these mushrooms, right? Now, the thing is that the side characters in this episode are black. Super dope. Awesome. That is incredible. The issue is that one of the characters, right, and a couple of these characters are homages to a couple of blaxploitation films from the 1970s, primarily Coffee and Shaft, and they're literally named respectively Coffee and Shaft.
Yeah, right.
Where the character of Coffee, who is this elegant, awesome, badass black woman, buys a watermelon. And so I saw that, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's really bad.
Yeah.
That's really, really bad. And no matter what context or intent or baggage you put into it, doesn't matter. That shit's bad. That's really bad and is with the racial stereotype of black people love watermelons, which is shitty. And it's kind of like also, there's also the drug dealer in that episode who was black and has this Rastafarian influence in the character design, which goes with the
I was about
stereotype
to say,
again.
yeah.
And at the end of the episode, they have this the cop at the end who is also black, and it feels kind of like the episode is trying to wipe its hands clean on sort of any sort of racial stereotypes that it has, and it doesn't. Blood on hands is still blood on hands. Lady McBee said it best, right? And luckily, too, that at the very least, this is not the only implementation of black characters in this show. I think the show probably could have used some more, right? But there is an eclectic amount of characters who do not have white skin in this show and also outside of this episode, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's really an issue when, even though you are expressing diversity, right, and which is great, it is an issue when you're going with these racial stereotypes. And not a tiny bit, but it is also an issue where, like, even though you're hearkening back to quote unquote better times, or like something that, you know, you are fond of, like blaxploitation films also, you know, purport this stereotype about black people who still today are trying to go against some of those stereotypes. And so even though this episode is super fun, super bombastic, has one of my favorite action sequences, has one of my favorite songs in it, it is a great episode through and through. It is stained remarkably by that.
Yeah.
And so the thing to look at is that when you think about it too, it's hard for me to think about any other anime that has the amount of black characters as Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop doesn't even have that many.
Yeah.
And so that is an sort of an issue, right? I mean, we're talking about art that comes from Japan. They probably have, and when I say probably, I mean, I think they do with some cultural stuff that they've had decades past in terms of clothing and makeup. But in regards to some of their opinions when it comes to black culture, right,
Yeah.
and black individuals, that is an issue. It's hard to think of other animes that have black characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And Shinichiro Watanabe is quoted in saying, as part of the Cowboy Bebop art book, and I'm trying to pull up the quote currently as we speak, and the art book is titled Cowboy Bebop The Jazz Messengers. He's quoted by saying, "I paid a lot of attention to skin color, also to using multiple languages. Lots of times when you watch anime, the characters all have white skin. All the characters and fantasy stories all have white skin, which I never liked. I wanted to have lots of characters in Bebop without white skin. And if people weren't used to that, well, maybe it would make them think a little bit more about it. National borders have always been arbitrarily drawn by people, and in ancient times there was a lot of exchange of people and culture with the continent." And I think that rings really, really true in the world of Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
It doesn't help when you are perpetuating some of these stereotypes.
Right.
So what it is that I think where I would like to believe as artists that we acknowledge this gray area where we can both praise and condemn the show. Condemn the show for perpetuating some of these racial stereotypes, right? Praise the show for actually implementing, and it's not just black individuals. There are a few South Asian characters that like pop into mind as well, and a couple of Hispanic ones too, that we should praise the show also for actually expressing this sort of diversity in a wide, expansive world that other animes have the opportunity to do so, and they don't express that same interest in doing so. And so what it is I think we should acknowledge that gray area where it's not this or that, it's a little bit of both, so that we can move towards the direction of expressing more diversity with less stereotypes perpetuating it. I realized that took me a very long time to express that thought. But I'm also a little bit heartbroken too, because I was like, God damn it, Mushroom Samba is such a great episode, and it's perpetuating something awful. So,
I wished, The way that you talked about it being stained, I think is is a really excellent way of saying that.
Yeah.
That it's that just because it is such a good shirt doesn't mean there's not a gigantic stain across the front of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know you meant that in more of a symbolic way, but I'm
Yeah.
pulling into the metaphor.
Which, I mean, like, it took me a while to just get to the big point of, like, the consumption of art and how we treat art and how we allow ourselves to view pieces of art that may be stained by whatever is in it or whatever is done by an outside force. Like, how do we acknowledge all of these things together, right? It's a step-by-step process so that in the future, right, we can make something that's better than what was given to us.
Right. And the just like you said, being able to condemn and celebrate simultaneously. Because I do completely agree with agree with that condemnation. At the same time, there were a couple times where I was shocked that I was seeing something that was made in 1998, and something that was as progressive as it was in specific ways. Like you said, like it was huge for diversity. At the same time, a hindrance in some ways for diversity. I would also
some transphobic things that I just remembered in the middle of the season. I believe during Jupiter Jazz, it felt a little bit transphobic at one point. There were a few people who with the characters' designs were clearly male, and it just felt like we're gross, you know, and they were dressed as females, and it felt like a sort of transphobic sort of thing. Another thing to condemn the show about, while also there are many diverse elements when it comes to the show.
Well, and that's exactly, I was about to say exactly what you just said. Which
Sorry,
is,
I just remembered that, so I just had to like put it
Don't be
out there
sorry.
because I think it's worth mentioning.
The second that it is Jupiter Jazz Part 1, the second that I'm confronted with that episode, I am met with, just like you said, both the feelings of this is really impressive representation for transgender people at the time, and I don't think I've ever seen a transgender person in an anime.
Which is really funny. Because that just reminded me, I wasn't even thinking about Grin, who is like
that's what I'm saying, Grin.
I wasn't even thinking about Grin.
Right, you were thinking about other
because there was like a group of like 3 individuals who purport like a stereotype, right? And I think Grin challenges the stereotype.
Absolutely. Like, I think that Grin is one of the most...
same episode.
Yeah, I think that Grin is one of the most forward-thinking transgender characters that I can think of in anime. Let alone, I can't even really think of any other transgender characters in anime, to be honest. I mean, especially like pre-2000. So yeah, I was very impressed with that. At the same time, the exact same thing. I was shocked that they would, in the same breath, perpetuate that.
And so I think it's also a constant dialogue of, okay, how do we, if there's going to be some stereotypical thing, how do we challenge that? You know, how do we do that with the art that we create so that like we do something better than what was given to us?
I also do wonder if that, and if this was the case, then it does not track now, at least. I wonder if that was part of the original intention, because like whenever you show me the stereotypes and then you show me Grin, it tells me that you know what the stereotype is that you are trying to intentionally break.
Right.
So I'm wondering, are you showing me the stereotype so that you can break it?
And it's hard. It's hard to say too, because like we weren't in the writer's room.
Right.
So like who's to say?
I'm trying to give it as much merit as possible.
Exactly. That's the impression that was left with us.
Right. But I either way that didn't really track. It was just a little uncomfy at times. Is really what it was.
All of that to say, though, gold medal, and this may be a shock.
If you say Mushroom Samba, you motherfucker.
No. Okay, I'm not
good.
going to give my gold medal to an episode this time. I'm going to actually give my gold medal to a character like the days of yore, right? I'm actually giving it to Ed and Melissa Fahn's performance of Ed. For a lot of just anything, really. There's this trope of a rambunctious child who is crazy and wacky and does all these random zany stuff. I think 99% of the time that doesn't work. I actually thought the 1% of the time you see it in Cowboy Bebop and with Ed. Ed does not overstay her welcome. Ed is not like too pivotal per se. Ed is not on screen too much, but the times that she's on screen, she actually adds this wonderful quality to the group and is really, really fun. And I think Melissa Fawn's sort of sing-songy, really full of life performance is an absolute treat, as well as like it's funny to me in a cosmic sort of way to watch a character in an animated show be so in their body. Which just doesn't make sense because there's no actor,
there's no body
in that sort of corpus, right. But like to see a character just like my thought is physically taking me in this direction. Sorry, I hit a lamp. Is physically taking me in this direction.
Right.
It's even in animation. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, I wonder what those conversations must have looked like to create that character and like just the artistry of the character, because I completely agree. Just it is.
It's like free flowing like water.
Right. It doesn't feel directed. It feels acted. Yeah. That there's definitely a life to that. And I feel so bad in saying this because I can agree that remind me, Melissa Fawn, is that what you said?
Melissa Fawn, yeah.
Melissa Fawn did a fantastic job as the English dub voice actor. But I have to say, I'm very sorry to say.
Oh no.
I was not the biggest fan of Ed.
You didn't like Ed?
I thought
I was fine with Ed the first time. Watching it again, I loved Ed.
I would say that I'm where you were the first time. That I wasn't really ever attached to Ed. I was always like, oh, there's Ed.
Yeah.
Until the Ed and Ein send off episode, which was
Hard Luck Woman,
I think. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, towards the end.
Yeah. Now that was a tearjerker. That was. I mean, it didn't get me there, but it was. Ooh, wow. That was a great episode.
And also like a wonderful episode for Faye as well. And
yeah.
God, I love Faye's development and what goes into her character, where like, and for a lot of these characters too, just who they are front in a sort of way to their vulnerable selves.
Yeah.
And the best example of that is Faye. And so
Faye
to watch her
is
progression is the
character.
best, right?
Yeah.
Like I think on an episode to episode basis, right? I think Jet, when it comes to dealing with his baggage, is the most interesting. But throughout the arc of the series, I think Faye is the best. And it's interesting because even though Spike is the coolest character, I guess I just don't find his backstory to be that interesting. And so it's a pivot. It's like the thing, when it comes to the halfway point and the finale of the series, right? Like his story is the thing, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to get your thoughts on that and how you felt about and Spike's exploration with the story that went into his character.
Right.
Because how it affected the other characters was great.
Absolutely.
But I don't find, even though he's cool, I'm not sure if I find Spike to be that interesting.
Okay, sure. I can agree with that. But I think what Spike adds the most in the show is style.
Yeah. He's a glue guy.
He is. Right. He keeps things together. Exactly. He is what I saw of him is that he was the perfect character to see the world through their eyes, like it was really easy to follow him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can agree that the episodes where we would take a look into his backstory were a little underwhelming. Honestly, I was more interested in the way that his backstory was affecting him now rather than the actual backstory itself. Do you know
That's
what I mean?
true. You know what? I'm with you there because I think, how all of these characters confront their past is super interesting. And I think I will have to give credit to the character of Spike as well.
Yeah.
Steve Bloom's performance, by the way, fantastic.
Out of this world.
Literally. And so then, how he confronts it, I think is really interesting because like he'll not even acknowledge it, and then he'll find out some small piece of information, and then the entire page flips, right? The entire book is just thrown out the door, and he goes full in with dealing with whatever baggage he has to deal with, right? And then all of a sudden, once it's done, he's out.
Right.
He's mentally checked out, and he's back with the group. Right. It's a super interesting conventionally as a character. I love that, but I guess because I suppose I found everybody else's backstories remotely interesting, and the characters surrounding it interesting.
Yeah.
That with Spike and how boring Vicious is, even though we're kind of led to believe that like Vicious was like Spike's go-to comrade.
Sure.
Doesn't really
doesn't really
add
do a whole
too
much.
much. And especially in the final showdown when it's between Spike and Vicious, and it's like this is supposed to feel more climactic, and it
I think
doesn't.
the most climactic part of the last episode was not whenever Vicious and Spike were fighting. I think it was whenever Julia dies. That's
true.
That
or
got
when
me.
Spike is leaving.
Sure. Oh, obviously.
When Spike is leaving the crew to
Right.
essentially go to his death.
That was obviously a huge one and everything.
Yeah.
And like Spike on the stairs, like last shot, everything, like all that's fine and dandy.
Yeah,
and
with the
whatnot.
music sort of, there is nothing. Oh, God, I think I've said it before on here. I've said it to my girlfriend Shama multiple times. There is nothing that gets me more than a sort of homecoming
Right.
sort of trope
Right.
that happens of like, it ends where it all began. Oh, and then you have the music that blares, which is the tune from the credits.
Yep.
Oh my God, nothing gets me more than that. So it feels like a wonderful, bow to tie on.
Right.
Even though I still have some issues when it comes to that. Well, because it's a big focus, and it felt like it didn't deserve that much of a focus.
Right. Well, although I would say my favorite backstory, because it was the most fleshed out and was the best in terms of like the pacing of. I mean, and by pacing, I don't just mean like the speed of the story. I mean more like the way in which they would reveal secrets, and I felt really invested in their backstory with Faye. I really liked Faye's backstory.
Yeah.
Really interesting, just like her
trust and what that did to her character and the discoveries that led for that character.
Right. And I mean, the second that we get a little bit of backstory for her, or every time we do, it like light bulbs are clicking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, even though Spike's backstory was not fantastic, for instance, just watching him have to deal with, like, because clearly he is deep down the most emotional one, yet he tries so hard to be the least.
Yeah. I mean, something as simple as like when Ed said her goodbye and she leaves that graffiti, bye-bye with a smiley face on the deck of the ship, and Spike is just looking at it, smoking a cigarette. Like, that's like...
What a moment.
Right?
What a
but
moment.
like, deep down there is like this pain, and there's this, but like love, right?
Right. Or like after Julia dies and he goes back to Jet, and they just have a meal together. And like it ends in this like kind of awkwardly long and overbearing laughter. But there's something about it that... Yeah, it's so interesting to watch.
Where like it's cool. It is kind of cool to watch a character who doesn't know really how to express themselves emotionally.
Right.
Right. And that's how he does it, right? And I don't think it's the sort of like edgy way that like most things do it, right? It's not like edgy in the way that Vicious is.
Right.
But
something
that's just how he goes through shit.
Something about the show that and a very good way of summing it up that I couldn't have summed up even better if I tried is I was watching a show with my 16-year-old brother, right? And he's a weird dude. He's got.
Did you watch the entirety of it with him?
No, we watched about 7 or 8 episodes together.
Okay.
Like a longer night of watching together, right? And so we're watching this thing, and he was one of the ones that like originally just showed the intro, and then he just kind of sat around and watched it with me for a while.
Sure.
And about I'd say about like 4 or 5 episodes in, like we're both emotionally attached. I think it was Waltz for Venus we watched together.
Oh,
and
where Spike sort of he doesn't
sorry.
recruit, but a guy hangs on to him, and Spike is the master. Yeah,
that episode fucking wrecked me.
It's one of the better episodes.
I love that episode. So we're watching this episode.
Hold on. That's really good. That's a really good example of like the characters themselves are not the most interesting, but what makes them great are the relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which it's not Rocco, but it's like pronounced differently.
I think it's
like Rocco, something like that.
I think
Who's like the side
Rocco
character
or
in that?
something.
Rocco, right?
Yeah.
And his sister who is blind. Like,
Right.
but like that relationship, even though they're never on screen together, is so strong.
I mean,
that's what gets you for that episode.
Right. And it is and they do such a good job of capitalizing. Another example of Spike not doing a whole lot, but in not doing a whole lot, doing a whole lot. You know what I mean? But we're sitting there, and my brother Owen, he at one point, like we're not crying, but we're like getting kind of emotional. Like we're very invested at the very end, right? And he's like talking to the blind girl at the the blind sister at the very end, and she's just like, I think it's better if you go, right? And he's like, okay. And so he starts like leaving, and then she says something to him. I can't remember what it was, but my brother, who was like a jock, like he never is like emotional really. He just kind of looks over with like a tear in his eye, and these are the exact words that came out of his mouth. He was like, "These were fucking drawings," and I was like, I couldn't have summed it up better
Isn't
myself.
That the beauty of stories.
It really is. Well,
and
if
the
it was
silence,
live action, that'd be one thing.
The silence that like Spike doesn't say a word, and I forgot her name, but she's able to figure out that Rocco is dead, and like you can hear a pin drop, and it's a wonderful, beautiful moment.
So you know how we were talking about whenever we were reviewing Casablanca, I talked about how something that makes Casablanca so impressive is that it had to shoot in black and white, but because it had to shoot in black and white, the director and cinematographer found a really smart way of using the black and white to make it to like add to the storytelling elements, right? Something that is true of like kind of older vintage style Japanese anime like Berserk is that it feels much more like a series of paintings than it does like a specific
moving
frame
pictures.
rate. Yeah, right, because the frame rate hasn't even hit like, 12.
And God knows how low that budget was.
Exactly. And so there's something so interesting about this show, Cowboy Bebop, because it uses it like the way that the script is written. It knows that it's going to have certain moments that are quite literally frozen paintings.
Yeah.
And in Berserk, those were the moments that would make me kind of like fade to sleep for a second, then come back in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was hard to stay with it
because they had to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And so it felt, for Berserk, it made it feel slow, whereas for Cowboy Bebop, it made it feel reflective or introspective.
And fight choreography that was super easy to track.
Right.
As well as like these dogfights in air that were super easy to track. Directed immaculately.
Yeah.
In terms of the shot composition, everything like
that.
2-minute
warning, baby.
Here we go.
Okay.
No penalties. We didn't get a
Absolutely.
penalty last time. We're gonna let it slide, but that's okay.
We're gonna add that in. That'll factor of we gotta respect.
But
this
we're
point,
okay.
2-minute
Yes, we gotta
warning.
respect the show. And the point is, we respect the shit out of Cowboy Bebop.
I mean,
this is a really, really fun, good show. It's not difficult to get through. It's a great time. It has really strong acting. I think the story is strangely beautiful in a sort of way, and it's nostalgic in its approach to the setting that it exhibits. It's incredibly a fun time, and there's a reason why it's considered one of the best animes, because not only is it a fun time, but it's character relationships that's engrossing, and characters going through baggage that is an absolute treat to watch. Mac.
I feel like this was such a journey of an episode. Like that went very fast. As do they always whenever we're doing longer series like this. But in the exact same way this episode was too fast, Cowboy Bebop was too fast. And I wish that they would have given us more. I wish there was more to say about Cowboy Bebop, but or from their part. But what they gave us was absolutely splendid. Now, Danny, next week we are going to be reviewing something with our good friend Travis Carroll.
Sweet.
He is going to be coming on the show. He is our resident musicology expert. And so I asked him.
We don't know bleep.
We don't know bleep. And so I asked him what would be something that you think would be a really, really good learning opportunity for our audience. And his response was, there's always one thing that I never found a chance to talk about that I would really love to on you guys' show, because you guys would love it as actors as well as its interesting music. And that is Car Seat Headrest's album, Twin Fantasy.
All right.
Thank you.